Hello and welcome. You're watching Money, 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 and I'm Samira Abdi. It's the start of a new financial year and therefore the best time to avail the maximum benefit from planning your taxes. Joining in to take us through the best way to do so is Hemant Rustagi of Wiseinvest Advisors. Hi Hemant, thanks very much for joining in. You know, almost everyone calls it tax planning, but there's very little planning that's involved, when we're investing for tax saving purposes. Now, besides the very obvious that, if my money is in a savings account, I get 4.5% as opposed to deploying it elsewhere, where I could get upwards of 8.5%, and therefore the incentive is to start early and get that 12-month advantage. Besides that, is there any other reason that I should look at investing at the start of a financial year and not at the end?
Well, I think, Sumera, there are a number of benefits. First thing, as you rightly said, if you're keeping the money in the same bank account, thinking that I'm going to invest all my money at the end of the year, obviously you tend to lose a lot. But I think more than that, there are a couple of factors that really impact your overall planning for taxes and as well as investment. One is it depends. First thing, you need to see where are you investing. Now, for example, if you're investing in, let's say, an equity-oriented option like ELSS, okay, the best thing is, not only that you have to invest for the long term, but it's also, if you follow a disciplined approach, you benefit a lot from averaging. So if you start investing right from April, okay, so even if you don't have a lump sum money at the end of the year, right, you can do SIP of 10,000 or 15,000 or whatever you need to invest every month. So what it does for you is it doesn't really put a lot of pressure on you at the end of the year. Second, because you're following a disciplined approach, okay, the equity market goes up and down, you benefit from averaging. So I think when you're investing in equity, the benefit is this. Even otherwise, okay, now if you really don't do it at the beginning of the year, you don't know how much money you need to invest. Okay, it's invariably what will happen for the salaried class. They will not have the money to invest at the end of the year. So then you look around, say how I'm going to arrange for this money. Sometimes you end up actually taking out money from your existing investment and put it for tax saving purposes. So I think, and then we've also seen a number of times where you end up investing in an option which does not suit your requirement at all because you did not plan it. Because there is pressure from you. From your office people saying, okay, you need to now invest. So you either buy insurance or you buy something else which does not really suit your requirements. So I think it makes a lot of sense that you plan your investment, especially for the tax purposes, at the beginning of the year rather than investing haphazardly at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's true actually, and in this way perhaps one can also look at tax planning in a more holistic manner, like for example, should someone also use this time to sort of make a tally of what are their assets, liabilities, what their net worth could look like?
Oh, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. It's not only about planning for your tax investment. We talk about reviewing your portfolio, we talk about reviewing your asset allocation. The problem is whenever we talk about investment, all of us talk about where should I put my money, how much return will I get. Very rarely you'll see someone coming and asking, how do I review my portfolio? But I think reviewing portfolio is as important as investing your money. In fact, it requires a similar discipline and the focus as you require when you invest your money. So what it does is, because it requires a discipline, doing it at the beginning of the financial year makes a lot of sense. Otherwise there's always a temptation. Now, if the equity markets are doing very well, why should I touch my equity assets? Okay, if the debt market is doing well, why should I, come out of that? The advantage of doing at the beginning of the financial year is that there is a discipline. You know exactly what you need to do. And I think many of us know at the beginning of the year how much I need to save for taxes, how much my income is going to be, okay, where I've gone wrong. So I think the important aspect is rebalancing also of your portfolio. Now, we always talk about asset allocation as an important aspect for investment. And why it is important? Because one, it tells you the kind of risk you're taking on your portfolio, and also tells you the kind of return that you can expect from your portfolio. So, it's very, very important to look at your asset allocation, and if need be, rebalance it. But it has to be done, by following a proper strategy.
Hemant, now the total tax saving that's available is close to about 4.5 lakhs, which virtually means that, someone with a salary of close to 7 lakhs is tax-free. What is the opportunity that I have in deploying pretty much everything? If I'm earning 7 lakhs, I'm deploying pretty much everything that I save into tax-saving instruments. Is there enough opportunity for me to be giving up a lot of the things that I could have done with that money and putting it into tax saving? Or could I look at perhaps investments which are more lucrative, but perhaps not in the tax saving mode?
See, it depends on, how you're going to claim the tax exemption. Now, for example, when we talk about tax exemption, you also get tax benefit on, the interest that you pay on housing loan, for example, right? You also get benefit on the principal repayment that you, give for your housing loan. So it all depends on that, because if you've taken a loan, for example, okay, you have to repay principal, you have to pay interest on that, right? What's happening here is you are getting tax benefit on that. Second part, as we discussed earlier, if you make tax planning, a part of your overall asset allocation, right? What you can do is, where do you normally invest? For example, let's say you may invest in some equity fund through SIP for your, let's say, retirement planning or for children education, right? You can do it through even ELSS. I mean, it's not that ELSS is meant only for tax saving, right? You can begin your process here. Once you complete 3-year period, you can move that money on. So, the way, if you can plan it properly, while you save tax, you're also not compromising on your other investment, which is what is very, very important, because you're not looking at only saving tax, but you're also looking at building your corpus for various other goals.
Okay, so now, besides PPF, which has been recommended on and off by almost everyone, what would remain your tax-saving instrument of choice? Should one look at perhaps the added advantage of the NPS, the extra benefit on the Mediclaim insurance? What would you advise people to look at this year?
Well, yes, I mean, this is typically what happens every year when the budget comes. Okay, this year again we got additional in NPS. Last year we got something on the housing loan and interest. I think that's why it's very, very important to keep an eye on what's happening in the budget. But I think how you benefit from that depends on, what kind of investor you are, who you are. Okay, if you're a public sector employee, you get pension. Maybe you don't need to focus too much on that. But if you're a self-employed or working in the private sector, because we don't have any social security, maybe your focus has to be on retirement planning. So I think it clearly depends on, who you are and what kind of investor you are and what exactly your goals are. Except retirement, most of the other goals are very similar. Okay, but the major difference comes in the retirement. So in terms of, when choosing the instrument, if you're a self-employed, okay, and if you don't have any provident fund, obviously PPF makes a lot of sense. Now, of course, you have other options. You have retirement funds of mutual funds. You also have NPS. Now, each one of these have their pros and cons of investing. If you look at NPS is a pretty good option for someone who is conservative. It also gives you additional benefit of 50,000. But if you're young and you can make your portfolio a little aggressive for building a retirement corpus, I still feel that, mutual funds can be a better option. So I think you need to really look at, you can't really go with a preconceived notion of where I need to put all my money. Like that's what I said earlier. If you make it a part of your asset allocation, you decide whether it should go into debt or it should go into equity, and then you need to look at which are the best options for you.
All right, so on that note, we'll take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll discuss some more of these options as well as some more strategies which could prove beneficial when you're planning your taxes. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a bit. Welcome back. You're with Money, Money, Money. Hemant Rustagi of Wiseinvest Advisors is our guide to tax planning this week and this financial year as well. So, Hemant, we've discussed in theory the principles that should surround, when one sits down to plan their taxes. What about the instruments then? You said that, choose it depending on what your need is. But what about something like tax-free bonds? Okay, so they were very widely popular the last time that they were here. This time around, the interest rate cycle is heading lower. The expectation is that the coupon rate will not be so attractive. Would you still advise people to include these tax-free bonds as a part of their portfolio?
Well, here again depends on what your requirements are. First thing I think we all need to understand when we talk about tax-free bonds, there is no tax benefit for investing in them. Okay, what they do offer to you is that any income that you earn out of that is tax-free. So I think let's get that out of the way, that you're not getting any tax saving on investment. Obviously, the fact that, if you're going to earn tax-free interest on that, it's a great plus. Because the only competing product that you have is PPF. Okay, and PPF has an issue because you cannot invest beyond a certain amount, right? And it is not basically for generating income for you. So I think this has its own advantages. But I think many times I've seen investors getting tempted just because the fact that they are offering tax-free interest. Now, look at the last year, or previous year, a lot of money has gone into tax-free bond. Now, you are willing to lock in your money for 15 years, 20 years in an instrument where you're going to get guaranteed return. I mean, that's the only attraction for you. But the fact is that if your objective is to build corpus, build a corpus large enough for your retirement or some such goal, this is not going to be enough. I do agree that these bonds definitely have a place in the portfolio, especially for someone who wants to plan, let's say, after retirement. It's not an investment to build corpus for retirement. But if someone is retired, because unfortunately there are not many options today where you can generate regular income, and that too tax-free and that too guaranteed. So some part of the portfolio can go in there. They usually give you yearly interest, so you can plan it in such a way that you get yearly dividend interest and you can actually use that. So definitely these bonds have a place in the portfolio, but as you rightly said, you also need to look at what do they offer. The interest rates have come down, they're going to likely to go down further. By the time these bonds are issued, you need to, because they are going to be aligned to the 10-year GSEC paper. So you need to look at basically what kind of interest they offer and then look at it. Don't jump just because it's offering tax-free interest.
Okay, so what about mutual funds then? They're one of the preferred vehicles. Within mutual funds, if I was to choose a tax-free mutual fund, would the returns be wildly different from a regular fund, and therefore do I have enough incentive to choose tax-free mutual funds?
Well, I think first thing we need to understand that, when you look at tax-saving instrument, there aren't too many options for you to invest in an asset class like equity. The first thing is that. So if you decide that you want to put money in equity, you have to look at something like equity-linked savings scheme. You also have recently, one of the fund has launched a retirement fund where you can actually put money. So there are very few options as far as the equity as an asset class is concerned. Now, in terms of return, now let's understand, ELSS have a lock-in of 3 years. Open-ended funds, obviously, they don't give you any tax benefit, but also you can exit any point of time. I don't think that's a major negative because, you're not investing for 1 or 2 years. So that apart. Unfortunately, majority of the money in the ELSS comes at the fag end of the year. So, the fund manager has an issue because he may get a lot of money, when the markets are already up.
Peaking out.
So it can impact the performance to some extent. But believe me, when you invest for the longer term, it doesn't make much of a difference. If you really have to compare ELSS performance today, with, let's say, multi-cap funds, I don't think the performance will be any inferior compared to.
So basically the advantage or the money that I save by investing in an ELSS or a tax-saving fund, that is good enough to sort of cover any lower returns that fund may be generating? No,
I don't think it. It can happen in certain years, the 1 or 2 years that, these funds may not perform. It could be again, you can't really look at the category as a whole. You also have to look at funds within the category. You will always see variation in the top performing fund and the funds which have not done so well. So I think you need to be very, very careful in terms of selection of fund. That's one. Equity as an asset class tends to be volatile. We all know that. And as I mentioned, the problem is sometimes the fund manager may get money at the fag end of the year. It may impact the performance for a certain period. But I think over a longer period, I don't see that becoming a negative thing for these funds. So I think these funds definitely allow you to understand equity because you get, as you rightly said, you get the tax benefit.
Fair enough. So just to wrap it up then, Hemant, you spoke about how tax planning should actually be a part of someone's overall portfolio planning or asset allocation. Within assets, if I'm using this time to review my assets, how do I rebalance it? What should an ideal portfolio allocation look like? And what is the kind of place that debt has? In this environment that we're in, the interest rate scenario, what kind of place does debt have? I mean, is it attractive enough for, say, the longer term for the next 10 or 15 years?
See, I think it's a very interesting question. Asset allocation is a function of what you want to do with your money. Now, you have some long-term goals, you have medium-term goals and short-term goals, right? When we talk about asset allocation, generally, we say that, it depends on what stage of life you are. If you're in the accumulation stage, more money can go into equity. If you are nearing your retirement, obviously then, unfortunately what we see is most of the people then come completely out of equity and go into debt, which obviously is not the right way because even after retirement, you still have to contend with inflation. So it depends on what stage of life you're in. So as far as the asset allocation is concerned, clearly depends on, what exactly you want to do with the money. I think the important thing is rebalancing it. Now what happens is, suppose you're comfortable with 60% equity and 40% debt. Now, should you rebalance it across your portfolio is an issue. My view is, if you're investing for retirement, let's say you have another 20 years to go, there's no need for you to rebalance because you still need to accumulate so much. If you're looking at a medium-term or short-term goal, or if you're nearing the retirement age, that's the time when you start rebalancing and increase more to debt. Coming to the question of what is the importance of debt in the portfolio, I think it's very, very important. In debt, the issue is, what are the instruments available to you to make some good return from there? You have traditional options, you also have market-linked products. Okay. Now, the scenario that we are in right now, we've already seen the interest rate cut 50 basis point. Okay, even though in the recent policy, they put a pause to that.
Yeah, but they forced banks to cut it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I think going forward, if you look at the next 1 or 2 years, you're definitely going to see interest at lower levels than these. These are times where you can, change your portfolio to some extent. You can look at market-linked products like income funds. Yeah. I'm not saying that you invest aggressively in them. So if you have, let's say, 50 rupees allocated to your debt fund, maybe around 15, 20 rupees can go into these kind of funds. That's what exactly I said. You need to keep an eye on what's happening for each asset class.
It's really a top-down approach. So first is decide that you need to do your tax planning at the start of the year or your portfolio planning at the start of the year. Look at the asset classes and only then decide the allocation within the asset classes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Hemant, on that note, thanks very much for joining in. And viewers, do remember, tax planning is called that for a reason. It involves a lot of planning. So I hope you're going to use this time to actually get started. Let's take another break on that note. We'll be back in just a bit. On the other side is our tip of the week. Stay tuned.